What's up, running fans, track fans, jumping, throwing fans, all around athletics fans? How's it going? Welcome to Talking in Ovals. I'm Alex Cuesta. As always, today is Monday, October 10th of 2022. The man that you guys all come to listen to is back today, so don't be afraid. You don't have to listen to my voice the whole time. But before we get into anything fun, please give a like, share, follow, subscribe, rate us 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth to any of your other trackies or running enthused people. And, let's just have some fun. Find us on the socials, Talking in Ovals. So, Hyatt, you're back. What's up, brother?
I am just happy to be back after a week hiatus and ready to do the show, man. We have a great guest, one of my good friends, and I'm just excited to talk shop with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying to me you're gonna like Wilfredo, you're gonna like him, and I'm like, yeah. I figured I would, because after I saw his responses, because I didn't make it no secret, I sent out a few questions beforehand to try and structure the show, and he sent me back his responses, and I read them. I'm like, oh yeah. This is a guy that I think I'm gonna enjoy. But quickly before we jump into today's show, please go back, listen to last week's show. Unfortunately, Hyatt wasn't there to be there, but we had Jonathan J. Marcus on. He's one half of Marcus and Magnus on the On Coaching podcast, all about running. He coaches elite athletes all over. So please go back and give that a listen. But let's now jump into today's show. Hyatt, this is one of your buddies. You've been saying, let's get him on, and I'm pumped to have him on. He's the head coach for boys and girls cross country since 2006, head coach for boys spring track since 2005 over at South Brunswick High School. He's been coaching for a totality of 21 years since 2002. Coach Wilfredo Rivera. What's up, Coach?
Hey, what's up, guys? Glad to be here. Excited to talk track. That's always a fun conversation, and pleasure to have me on. Pleasure.
Certainly. Yeah. And what, obviously what we're trying to do here is, we talk track, probably all three of us talk track as often as we can to anybody that will listen. And, you get the benefit of being a coach. You can talk about it a little more. Me and Hyatt are kind of stuck, kind of talking to our significant others and them being like, yeah, cool. Yeah. Bye. So it's like, we do this. It's kind of our way of kind of our therapy of talking about track. And we love jumping in with others. And you are actually, he's our first high school coach, isn't he? Yeah. Yeah, he's our first coach in the high school, and we kind of want to walk around those ranks too, because like I said, I talked to Jonathan Marcus last week, and he's, very much an elite coach. He coaches a lot of elite athletes, high level, high octane athletes. And now it's fun to jump down into the high school level, the scholastic level, and try and pick your brain, because there's obvious differences here. One of the things that I want to start with here is you've been doing this for 2+ decades now. When you started 20 years ago, what was it like, and what has it been changing? Like, what has changed since you started coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a lot has changed, since, even within the last 5 years. I mean, I think one of the major differences is just the amount of information that's out there to kind of be digested. I know when I first started coaching, everyone got the Jack Daniels running formula book, and you were dealing with VDOT, and you were just trying to make sense of, okay, well, how do I use this? The lore of running was a big, huge scientific foreign language book for me. But the information really changed. And I think you just started to, see kids you started to see coaching. You had clinics, and you would go and you would hear guys that had their experience talk. But, the internet obviously has been around a long time, but it's just the amount of information that was out there to be digested, not only by the coaches, but the athletes. I felt like it just made everything just kind of elevate in the sense of the intensity and, what it is that people were looking for in the sense of what can they apply, what they can learn, Whereas, when I was running and even early on in the coaching, it was just kind of, you pick little things here or there. But now there's just so much good stuff out there that you can use.
I also feel like coaches are a lot more amenable to helping other coaches. I remember when I was in high school, there was no way that my high school coach was sharing anything with any other coach. So I feel like it's definitely more of a brethren now, where, like, hey, what's worked for you? Or, you had this guy last year who was super elite. I have one now, maybe I can shoot some things off of you, and then we can kind of, I don't know. I feel when I was coaching, I definitely got a lot from other coaches that I don't feel that my high school coaches would have even talked to other coaches. So I think that that dynamic has kind of changed some.
Yeah, well, and to build off that, I think even the athletes themselves just being a lot more aware and connected with one another. I know, when I had rivalries with other schools, those guys, we just didn't talk. There was nothing to talk about, right? We're trying to win, we're trying to beat you. And, maybe that came from the coaching dynamic or the athletes were driving that. But nowadays, I mean, these kids are friends on the social media, and, they're having relationships that go beyond just the competitive side. And I think, that probably branched off a little bit more into coaches going, well, hey, our guys are kind of maybe doing long runs together, maybe training in the summer. Let's talk about what you're doing, and maybe that can help them just get better.
Yeah.
And I think with track in general, sorry, Dave, with track in general too, especially with the distance runners, I feel like that became a thing definitely in my generation, because I was definitely a lot more friendly with a lot of the guys I competed with. Like on the track, we certainly hated each other. Like the elbows would go and everything within cross country, like all the normal stuff. Like track's not a physical sport. Yeah, try doing a distance race. But anyway, it definitely started, I think, a lot more there, because in high school, you certainly found a group of kids in the summer that were kind of at your level. And instead of always training with your school, in Ocean County, I knew a bunch of guys, and we would definitely meet up at Ocean County Park and go to Monmouth and do certain things and run together. So I think that dynamic certainly changed at some point from, your generation jumping into mine.
Listen, we didn't train with anybody but the kids on my team.
Yeah.
Luckily, I had great teammates. But it's funny because Will and I graduated the same year in high school, and for his first 2 years, we were in the same group for cross country. So I knew who he was. I didn't like him. I didn't like Cedar Ridge. I didn't like anything about them, because we were always, it was us, North Hunterdon, and Cedar Ridge always battling out, for the state championship for Group 3. And then when I got to college, I was like, this guy's super cool. And then we became really good friends. But high school, no way. We weren't allowed to talk to anybody. Like my coach didn't allow it. It was a sign of weakness.
Do you think, for both of you, do you think a lot of it changed where sportsmanship started to get promoted much more in sports? I think there was a certain time where there was a lot more preaching of being a good sport and the importance of being a good sport, and not just not complaining about losses, but kind of respecting your competitors a little more. And I think kind of the respect level kind of branched into more friendships. Do you think that has something to do with that, Wilfredo, where, the sportsmanship maybe pushed a little bit too far and now became friendships, and then social media kind of solidified friendships?
I think there's definitely some truth to that. I hate to keep going back to this kind of knowledge is power, but I think, when you only see someone as just a competitor or an adversary, you can't see them outside of that. Yeah. So what winds up happening is now, hey, you get to see them and, maybe what they're posting, and they have similar interests outside of running. And then you go, oh, this is kind of a cool guy, or we have things in common. So, as Dave said, when we got to college, well, now we're on the same team. So even though we had different philosophies perhaps coming in, well, we have some common ground. Mm-hmm. And, I think everyone, at least when, in the mid 90s, we used to have to wait for information at the end of the season. Right. We'd have to wait for Ed Grant to put out, one of his annuals, or we'd have to find out about this blonde haired kid from California, Michael Stember, running, times and then going, well, who's this guy? And then once you actually got to start seeing them and you started going to these national meets and, okay, well, he's just a normal kid. I feel like it just kind of broke the barrier of mystique and, maybe some of that hate, if you will. And then you go, okay, well, they're just like me. They're trying to win. And you get a sense of respect, right? That whole iron sharpens iron. So I'm only as good because you're doing what you're doing and I want to be as good as you. But before that, you were just a name. Now I have a face. Now I have a personality. Now, I guess for the kids, not that I'm using that, but now I have social media to see what they're about besides just, running or competing against me on Saturday.
Yeah, certainly. I'm going to do something a little off topic so we could jump back in because it jumped into my head. And I need to ask you guys, especially being longtime coaches, someone that I was talking to, another runner, took a little bit of an issue with something that Marcus put out saying that he was wrong. And it had to do with breathing. Basically that learning how to breathe correctly, breathing in your nose, out your mouth when running. And he was like, no, that's been scientifically proven wrong, that oral breathing actually brings in more, blah, blah, blah. What's your experience as runners and as coaches? Do you recommend still doing in your nose, out your mouth? Are you more of, if you're orally breathing only, that's okay? What do you guys think there?
My whole thing was, to any athlete, as long as you're breathing, I don't really care how it gets done.
Okay.
Like, I never really broke it down into, I guess, in high school, you're worrying about so many other components, I guess at that elite level, it's a lot easier to focus on those smaller things. But, as a high school, middle school coach, there's so many other things. I never really paid attention to how my athlete was breathing. I mean, if it was obvious, I guess I always went, I guess, I don't even know. I just ran.
I mean, my take on the breathing, it's almost kind of like placebo effect. Whatever you feel is working for you, keep doing. But I always try to use the breathing and breathing patterns in the sense of using it as a cue to just kind of bring more comfort to the run, right? So I talk about, hey, if you run by someone and they're breathing heavy, that might be a sign that, they're laboring, right? So maybe you pull a surge and vice versa. Hey, listen, if some guys are coming up or some girls are coming up alongside you and you're sucking wind, that's going to give them maybe some confidence in the moment to go, you know what, let me pull a surge. Let me pull a surge up this hill. So just kind of be aware of how your breathing might present you to your competition and to yourself, right? And then, of course, there's always I have a stitch, how you work out cramps and stitches with breathing. And, what I was always taught is, hey, if you got a cramp on your right side, every other step with your left, breathe out, right? Because you got some air trapped in your diaphragm. So push it out, work it out.
Yeah.
And practice that in practice, because if it happens in a race, you don't want to slow down. You don't want to drop out. So, so to me, that's where the breathing comes in. But, my logic tells me the more air you're going to, the more oxygen you can take in, the better. So, I'm always a big fan of, hey, if, you got to use your mouth, because I've had kids who, they run like, their mouths are shut tight. And I'm like, that doesn't look comfortable. And you can only get so much air through your nose. So, kind of be a mouth breather, if you will, and, do what you can to get what you need.
Yeah, I was always an in your nose, out your mouth guy. I don't know why. I was always taught that was kind of the rhythm of running. But then again, who knows? But some advice for any young runners that have never run indoor before: don't worry about breathing in indoor. Because if you really are trying to breathe, it's going to fail. Indoor, it sucks to breathe. So if you're running indoor track for the first time, if that's your focus on breathing, you're going to have dry mouth really quick. It happens on the first lap if you're a distance runner. So that was kind of a social media thing that I was talking about there. I want to transfer over there because I mentioned social media a few times. How has that come into coaching? Where a lot of athletes are, I can imagine, especially some of the smart ones that really love the sport, that are, on flow track and on things. Do you have a lot of athletes coming to you saying, hey, coach, I saw this. Hey, coach, I saw that. Can we try this, coach? This athlete posted this up. Like, what has your experience been with the social media burst and influencers and big time runners and everyone posting their workouts and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, my take is, like I said, it's like with everything, variety can be good, but it's got to come in moderation. So, what works for someone may not necessarily work for you. I always like students of the sport. I'm a big track nut myself. So when kids are nutty about track, I never want to stop that, right? I never want to kind of contain it. But, what I always tell kids is, look, there's a bunch of ways to get to where you might want to be, and not one way is the only way. So, if they come in and say, hey, coach, what do you think about this? We can talk about it. And I'll say, yeah, I understand that, or I don't understand much about that, but here's why I won't use it, or here's why it's not a bad idea. So, I kind of take it in stride because, it's inevitable. Kids have a lot of their own opinions, and they're real quick to jump on maybe a trend or a fad or something that they think is working. But, my argument's always, listen, it's about consistency. So if we've been doing it and it's been working, we can stay that. Doesn't mean we can't alter it. But we're not going to try something new and funky and think that it's going to lead to something right away. Slow and steady gets it, done. At least that's been my take with it.
Yeah. So I wanted to just ask you something that we've talked about a few times on this podcast. So you've been involved in the track and field cross country in the state of New Jersey for probably since 1992, freshman year of.
Yeah, freshman year, Cedar Ridge, yeah.
And every year since that time, there's always been a meet of champions at the end of the season to determine the best of the best. What is your take on this, on the NJSIA wanting to get rid of the meet of champs? I mean, we have our thoughts. I think it's absolutely ludicrous and insane. But I'm just wondering, from a active coach's perspective, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, Meet of Champs is happening. The version of it has changed a bit for this season. How I feel about it is, it seems like since COVID, a lot of motivation in a lot of different areas has been to get down to kind of an approach that fits all, right? So, all right, well, we're not going to have tournament of champions for basketball and other sports. So because we're not doing that for other sports, we want to end, what would be our equivalent of the tournament of champions, if you will, the meet of champions, because fair is fair. Now, for example, when COVID hit in my particular conference, which is the GMC, I thought that would have been a great time to really highlight and lean into cross country because it was one of the sports that you can actually do outside. And really for this once in a lifetime, knock on wood type of pandemic situation, why not give this sport the spotlight because it was available to be? But instead, my conference said, since we're not having any conference championships for any sports, we didn't have a conference championship for cross country. And I just thought that was like a really lost opportunity within our conference. I mean, other conferences, they did it the right way, in my opinion. So, going back to the Meet of Champs, I get that there's always, ways to try to make things better, but it's the old adage, you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face. And because our sport is unique and because it can, break down to one single championship, the other sports have tournaments, right? They have brackets. This is a one-day, one-shot opportunity to define the best of the best.
Yep.
You don't lose that opportunity if you don't have to. It seems like cooler heads prevailed and we were able to maintain it as best as we could. The qualifying format changed a bit. I don't want to get into the weeds with the details, but, they will be crowning a team championship for Meet Champions and, an individual winner. And, for me, given that something had to give because the decision makers wanted to tighten it up a bit, it was better to have the version that we have than to have lost it in totality.
So being an active coach, did they give you a particular reason as to why this is something they want to do? Because as I look at it from the outside looking in, the Meet of Champs, is not only an opportunity to win it all and to compete against the best of the best, but for these juniors especially, and even some seniors that haven't made decisions yet, that's a big deal. If you race and compete well in the New Jersey Cross Country Meet of Champions, that's a really big deal and something that you could show prospective coaches hey, I competed well against the best in New Jersey, or hey, I was a top 5 scorer on a team that won the Meet of Champions championship. So what is kind of, their reasoning for why they want to do this to a sport where it's kind of like you said, we don't go through a tournament. We don't go through the grueling type of thing that a lot of them do. It's one shot, one deal, perform your best, win it all, or, go home and just be happy you got here. So what did they give you on that?
I mean, really, it was, again, initially when they said they were making the decision to get rid of the Tournament of Champions for basketball, and I believe, the softball or some of the other sports, their initial take was that Meet of Champions was not going to be, cross country was not going to be impacted by this decision. And girls lacrosse and all the other sports, they had the Tournament of Champions. And their argument was that the Tournament of Champions were very lopsided. What was happening was the same teams were winning. You were putting, a group 4 school against a group 2 or whatever it was. And these were very lopsided games, especially in basketball. And, what was kind of the point? You had the same winners. It wasn't really this great dynamic within the tournament. But again, under the idea that cross country was going to be touched. And then when cross country was going to be touched and there was going to be no team championship, they were basically arguing that they were going to make the Meet of Champions a real highlight, to your point, actually for individuals. They wanted to make it more of an individual event, but obviously cross-country coaches argued you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have the individual aspect because that was already there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But to take the team, again, because it wasn't going to require anything. You weren't going to have multiple days, multiple races. It was a one-day thing in which the individuals could fall in line with the team component. So I think a lot of it was just trying to streamline some of the tournaments. And then they said, well, let's streamline this. And, our argument was kind of, if it's not broken, why are you trying to fix something that doesn't need it? But, something had to meet in the middle. And then ultimately, it got down to, 14 teams are going to qualify for the Meet of Champions, whereas the old format, it would have been 20.
What is what is the qualification based on? Because I feel like it could hurt the smaller schools and definitely have an advantage for the larger schools.
And it will impact the smaller schools. And that's something that's kind of a catch-22, right? You don't want to see anyone excluded. However, playing devil's advocate, everyone still has their group meet, right? So those small schools are still competing for their Group 1 title. The parochial Bs are still competing for that title. And those group winners will still be going to the Meet of Champs. It's just the wild cards. So I believe the format is that the top 6, the group winners will be in, and then 8 wild cards once they merge all of those group results into kind of a virtual meet. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you'll see who the 8 additional wild cards to get that 14.
And that's all based on team average in the group meet?
Yeah, that day. And, it's as good as it gets because, is it possible that the early races are run in perfect conditions and some tornado rolls in? Yeah. I mean, you're always going to run that risk, but at the end of the day, you're probably going to see the majority of the wild cards come from the bigger groups, the competitive groups that are deeper, because the races will be a lot more competitive in the middle and the meat of it all.
I feel like in cross country, though, out of a lot of other sports, the small schools do get a better opportunity, because to have a group of 5 run really fast, even at a small school, there's as opposed to other sports, there's still a really good opportunity of that happening in XC. So you can have a good small school that just has a really good running culture, and they consistently kind of bring it, even if they're not winning. So I think that there's a good chance there. And I want to dive back in a little more into the coaching side of it, because, we only have you here for a set amount of time, and I really want to pick your brain, because so far your brain is working pretty well. I'm liking it right now. So, so I want to talk about kind of, you mentioned kind of adjusting before, when we were talking about other athletes bringing in their kind of ideas from social media and things like that. Talk about adjusting, because you're the cross-country coach for both men and women. So kind of talk about your adjustment when you're dealing with different athletes, their characteristics, whether it's, their sex, how good they are, how driven they are, different cultures, different people. Like, how is it, do you find that, you mentioned everyone has a little bit of a different style. So what is your coaching style as, with each individual athlete? Do you kind of do more blanket with cross country? Does that change coming into track? What's your approach there?
Okay, so my feeling with the beauty of cross country is that the end game is the same for everyone, right? So regardless if you're a freshman, a junior varsity level runner, varsity runner, boy, girl, we're all trying to get ready for the 5K. And we're all trying to get ready, at least in our conference, to run fast at Thompson Park, because that's where our county meet is. That's where our sectional is. And then obviously Homedale Park is where the groups and meet of champs, but, now we're talking varsity level. Yeah. So what I've always felt with cross is I love cross because we're all training for the same thing. Track, it gets a little hard and it's a little bit more nuanced, because now you got your hurdlers, you got your sprinters, you got your weight guys, you got your vaulters, you got your long jumpers who might sprint and hurdle or whatever the case might be. So you got a lot of different, at least how we talk about it is we have our units, right, in track, whereas cross country, we're all getting ready for the same thing. Now, the way I try to think about training is experience matters, right? You gotta know what you're getting into, and there's a consistency. Cross country for me is the foundation. That's what we build the house on. But it doesn't mean that everyone stays to, doesn't mean they're going to winter track. It doesn't mean indoor track. Doesn't mean they're doing spring. But if you're going to do cross, our season starts in the summer. By the time we get to day one of school, half of our season is done. And that's hard for a lot of kids to buy into and to really embrace. And, obviously we want everyone competing at the best level, but, what we do is, my argument is we don't cut kids, they cut themselves. Because if they can't commit to the process, what happens is they're going to get hurt.
Yep.
And as a coach trying to be responsible, I can't ignore the fact that you didn't do the work that was required for half the season, because you're going to come in, you're going to try to do too much too fast, and then you're going to get hurt. And then that's my problem anyway. Right. So motivation levels are all different. I'm usually a little bit more lenient and understanding when they're young, because, they may not know. They might come from a middle school where, they're canceling practice when it rains. And I'm not judging that middle school. I don't know that life, but, we don't cancel practice because it rains, because we have to race in it. So, so sometimes there's some adjustment in getting them to understand what we're about. Do I think we lose kids because, it's it's a little too serious at the high school? Yeah. And I don't hide behind that. We're serious because, like I said, as trying to be a responsible coach, I have to have you ready, and I need you to feel confident that you're ready. Now, in regards to boys and girls, I treat them the same. We have a lot of groups that are commingled. I would love to have groups that are just girls working together because they're going to have to race together. But for example, this year I have a really small girls team. It's the smallest team I've had since I've been here. We have 11 girls, which is,
wow.
There's another conversation in regards to why I think that's happened. But, but I have, a girl who just ran 1925, and she's training with a group of boys when she works out. But some of her distance runs she does with some of her female counterparts, only because you want to build the culture with their teammates that they're going to race with. But at the same time, you want to get the most out of that runner, regardless of gender. And because we go to all the meets, and because I'm the head coach for both, I have to deal with both. So I'm always going to approach the training the same way. I'm a father. I have 3 daughters. So since I've had my kids, I've learned that, you have to know your clientele, and you can't talk to everyone the same way. And sometimes you have to be a little softer and a little bit more understanding. So, those are little kind of nuanced things that I have learned along the way, because, having been coached by male coaches and been in a all male program all the time, some of that, bring the intensity wasn't really working, and it was kind of backfiring. And at the end of the day, I want them to get out of it what I'm trying to get them to get out of it. And if you don't have that line of communication working, it doesn't matter what you say, what you do. It's just not gonna get across.
I want to say, because I remember, obviously, you and I were in college together, and I knew that I wanted to be a coach when I got out of college. I remember talking to you in college, and you had zero interest in coaching. Like, it was something that was not on your radar at all. So just tell us what changed that viewpoint for you, and also what was it like going back to coach in the same conference against your old coaches in high school, and had to go up against those guys who helped mentor you as a person and as a coach?
Yeah. So, you're 100% right. I didn't have any interest in coaching. I never even thought about myself as a coach. Now in retrospect, teaching, being a parent, being a friend, you're always coaching people up. People are coaching you up. It might be a little bit more, serious things in life than it is necessarily the X's and O's of trying to run a certain time or do a certain thing. But the long and short of it was Brian Jost, who was, started the girls program at South Brunswick. He was the boys and girls cross country coach. He was a coach that was coaching when I was in high school. He approached me at the end of my first year of teaching, and he said, "Hey, listen, hey, Will, good to see you. I have a coaching position open. I would love to have you come on. You were at a great program at Oak Ridge. You ran at Rutgers." And the fact that he took the time to come seek me out and ask if I was interested in coaching, I agreed to do it almost just out of respect, for this great guy, this great coach who felt that I could add something to his program. And that was it. He basically said, "I'd love for you to," and I said, "Okay, I'll do it." It was just, like I said, it was really just out of respect that he even took the time to consider it. And then, before you know it, here I am, 20 plus years later. But that's how it started. In regards to coaching against, my high school coaches, that was really hard in the beginning because, as the competitor, I I wanted to beat them.
Yeah.
And a lot of the, South Brunswick kids would say, oh, you ran at Old Bridge, like, what did they do? And I laughed and I said, what do you mean? What did they do? And they're like, well, why are they so good? Why do they always win? And I go, guys, like, they just work hard and they just expect to win because they work hard and there's a culture there and there's nothing special in the water. Like, I went there, like, there's no secrets. It's just hard work. And, and to see that, it was, kind of like, oh, all right. Well, I guess people might see things about Old Bridge that I just took for granted because I was in it. But then once I got to be a Viking, like I said, I love my coaches, Coach Kabauer, Coach Campbell. I mean, those guys were, as you alluded to, Dave, like, those guys helped me become the person that I am and who I wanted to be, though I didn't want to coach. And so I wanted to beat them. And, a bunch of years, we were not beating them. We were finishing second, but we were making progress. And, and then I remember when we finally got over the hump in cross and in track, it was a great feeling. But I think there was also that sense of, I don't want to speak for them, but I think there was that sense of pride, if you will, because they knew that they had created, created a monster, if you will, because of their thing. And, it's funny because as I've been here and have had other athletes come and coach with me, look, there's going to be coaches that make a lot of great athletes, that run fast times. But I feel like one of the things that really shows the impact of a coach is the coaches they make, because that's going to have so much value year in, year out because of the athletes that one athlete and coach has helped, develop. So it's kind of that pay it forward that just keeps multiplying. So, to me, that's part of their legacy, is that anything that I have done and will do for any of my athletes started with those guys. And that's pretty powerful, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So, I'm like Dave. I always wanted to be a coach. Like, that was one thing I knew. Once I was done competing, I was interested in coaching, and, I pursued it as much as possible. And right now I'm coaching my daughter's U5 soccer team. So, I'm still doing it, man. But, one of the coolest things for me was, and once I entered into coaching and I started doing it, I feel like the title of coach and being known as coach is something akin to like when people call like other people doctor and things like that. Like, it really does become something awesome. And the relationships you make with athletes, and then when you see them years down the road and you talk to them and they still have that respect level for you as coach, like, for me, it was just awesome to be able to have those types of relationships. And the title of coach to me is just possibly one of the coolest titles I think anybody can have. And I think Dave agrees with me. So you didn't want to be a coach. So when did it kind of click for you that, okay, this is actually pretty cool. Like, I'm actually enjoying this. I'm enjoying the camaraderie. I'm enjoying the friendship I'm building with, seniors that are leaving and then they come back and I'm still coach. I'm not Mr. Rivera anymore. Like, no, I'm forever in their eyes coach. Like, when did that click for you that, this is pretty cool and I can do this for a long time?
I guess, after the first couple years of doing it, and because it was kind of really intimidating at first, because now you're responsible for this whole group and you're going like, listen, I knew what to do when someone told me to do it, but I don't necessarily know what to tell you to do. So, there was a lot of a learning curve. I mean, and I think any good coach, after a while, you go back and go, man, if I knew then what I know now, like, I could have helped that kid be so much better. I could have made better decisions. So I'd say maybe, the first, really all those years that I was an assistant, those first 4 or 5 years, when I was an assistant for cross, because I actually became a head coach for track before the cross country team. And then just that, Brian Jost, Coach Jost, when he was retiring and he was like, hey, you can do this. I guess that was kind of really the stamp of like, all right, this guy, like I said, this guy's the reason there's even a girls cross country program.
Yeah.
He's been the only girls cross country coach until it got handed off to me, if you will. And I'm going, okay, well, he's the one who came and sought me out and said, hey, I think you can help us. And then feel comfortable enough to retire and go, this guy's going to do all right. Or at least, this guy's going to do well enough. But at the end of the day, I'm out of here. I think that might have been where I said, okay, people are seeing it. And then, once you started getting results and, we started to be, somewhat successful while I was head coach, because they had their own success prior to, I think that's when it started to go, okay, maybe I can do this. Anytime athletes come back and they go, hey, coach, like I missed this, or I remember that, or, that always just kind of brings a good feeling because you feel like, not everyone's going to go and run in college. Not everyone's going to go be a coach. But when they come back and you see the maturity, it makes it all worthwhile.
Certainly.
So any coach who has coached high school, especially a distance coach, knows that it can be a long, grueling year. If you coach cross country, winter track, spring track, especially the 2 track seasons, because those meets tend to go on for,
forever.
Yeah, pretty much. So you were doing that, and then you had a family. And you and I have talked about this, where you actually took off a few seasons here and there because maybe you felt that it was taking away from some of your time at home. So what was it like to have to make that choice? And was it an easy choice? Was it a hard choice?
Yeah. So my history was I had done 13 years of cross, winter, and spring. So, 39 seasons. And then I came back for cross, and that was the 40th season. And then I took off winter. And honestly, what made it very easy was that, one of my assistant coaches in cross, Matt Randall, who was an alumni of South Brunswick, he was there to kind of take my position in winter. And because, we worked together in the fall, and like I said, cross country is the foundation, it was really easy to kind of hand it off the same way it was handed off to me, knowing, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. It's going to give him his opportunity to kind of, guide the ship, if you will, for the distance runners. So it made it easy to leave because I knew when I came back in spring, these kids were going to be where they should be because our coaching philosophies were aligned and whatnot. It also made it easy because, what was happening for me personally, and this is when I knew I had to give up winter just for myself. Winter was always a nice season because I was an assistant and I didn't have to do all the head coach paperwork and all the other things that come with being a head coach that have nothing to do with the training.
Yeah.
And then I came into spring and we had this great run of like, we were having great seasons, all year. And it was just high intensity nonstop. We got to win this. How are we going to get ready for that? That I went into spring burnt out before it even started. I was just toast. And I was like, I can't do this because now I'm the captain, if you will, of the ship. And I don't even want to be here right now because I'm just toast. So that was a sign for me personally. And then obviously at home, the captain at home is my wife.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And she was dealing with, Sonia, she was dealing with all of the responsibilities and just being able to say, hey, like, I think everything's kind of lining up to not do this. And, she said, you can do it if you need to, because, that's the type of woman she is. And just being able to be there, whether it's to take this one to dance or it just, again, it reminded me about my responsibilities at home. And that felt good, too. And that's something that I think as all coaches that have families, I'd let my athletes know, like, hey, listen, man, like, I love working with you guys, but while I'm here with you, like, for example, this Wednesday, hey, I'm here with you. We have our divisional race. Some of you are going to be working out. I'm missing my daughter's race. And I go, and that's fine because I signed up for this. But so did you, right? So, hey, let's not talk about, oh, I have this club or I have to go here or I have to do this. Hey, we all have a lot to do, but we sign up for things and we gotta be held accountable for what we commit to. So, I think, I know this is a little off topic, but I think in some ways that's one of those things that has been very important in taking seasons off, because there was some guilt, right? Like, hey, man, I'm leaving these kids. It's their senior year. I've been coaching them. This is when they want to hit these goals. But knowing that you can hand it off to someone that knows what they're doing, and at the same time, lighten the load at home and, take a breather so I can recharge for spring, that's been awesome. Now, saying all that, I did get pulled in like Michael Corleone, I try to go out and they pulled me back in, and I did get pulled in last winter because they needed someone. And, it was great to be back because it was, I hadn't done it in like 5-6 years. And anyway, so that, so I did get pulled back last winter. And, that was nice. But, winters off is good for the soul.
Yeah, I can't blame you at all.
I definitely think, the fact that you have someone that you trust is huge, because I know, like, it's very hard to leave something that you have such pride in to a person that you're not sure if they can actually get the job done. So I think that was a very, very valid point.
And that had to be a little nostalgic for you to be able to hand off a program that you probably had pride in and that you probably really worked to build up. And now you're doing essentially what was, like you said, what was done for you. Like, you handed a program to another, young coach that now can kind of spread their wings and fly, which I think, had to be a little nostalgic for you there.
Yeah, listen, I feel like, just speaking about the coaching racket, a lot of coaches don't last long anymore. Those old school coaches that are coaching 30, 40 years, and I say that as someone who's been at it, 20 plus, but it's kind of like a dying breed. And I think when you're doing it right, it almost has to be that way because you put a lot into it. But having kids have experience with other coaches, that's why when I have athletes and they do other sports, when I was a younger coach, I used to hate that stuff. What? You're going to go do this? What are you talking about? That makes no sense. But from a life, yeah. But from a life experience point, sometimes just learning to see someone else have an impact, see how they coach the kid up, can be very powerful for those kids. And it could be a good break because we know that, when it's summer, it's fall, it's winter, it's spring, and it's the same kids and the same coaching, sometimes the message gets a little stale and it gets a little old. So bringing in some young coaches, bringing in people that have that fire that you may not have, you like to see it. At the same time, you hate to see those experienced coaches go. But, the coaching racket it's a grind, man. So you're seeing more and more coaches, the lifespan, if you will, shorten. And that is a little tough for programs to keep the continuity. That's what we kind of been blessed with at South Brunswick, is that we've had coaching staffs that have been pretty consistent. And I think that leads to consistent results. And, the culture stays, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And I love that you call it a coaching racket. I think that's absolutely fantastic and a great way to describe what it is. But I have to ask you, because this is going to get a little bit deep, but mental health has been a huge thing for young kids lately. And I have my opinions on why and what and everything, but that's neither here nor there. But you're a coach now, again, like we mentioned a few times, 2 decades plus. How has the athlete changed that you have coached? Because I feel like they're different mentally, and cross country especially, and distance runners, that is something that I think, obviously, you have some people that have immense ability, but in order to be a good XC runner, you have to be 80% mentally tough and 20% talented. I think that might be shortchanging the mental toughness aspect of being a skilled runner. So what have you seen with the athlete and the changes over the last 20 years, and how has that affected you and your coaching style?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit deep, a little loaded. I'm sorry, but I had to drop it in there.
No, it's a great question. It's a great topic because, I've lost many athletes over the last couple years to what I would, I do think there was a COVID effect. And what I mean by that is, I think COVID has killed many athletic careers. And what I mean, especially scholastic careers, because what happened is when you're in a routine and you know it, and again, this is just my opinion, and then that routine's taken away, listen, something fills the void. And that something isn't always good.
Yeah.
Right? So what happens is out of sight, out of mind. And now kids are trying to get back into a fold that they either never really knew or they knew, but it's not the same anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that type of change and shift was really demoralizing. So, this kind of fits in with it. So it's a very kind of interesting for me. So here's what happened, right? 2020, that spring, I had the best team I was ever going to have on paper. I mean, we were dynamic. We had dynamic pieces. They had crushed all indoors. They had won everything indoors with the exception of state relays. They won the section. They won the county. They won Group 4. We were going to be adding that, and we were going to be adding other kids in like events that they didn't have indoors. Long jumpers, triple jumpers, discus throwers, jab throwers. We were loaded. Now, we all know what happened 2020. It got canceled.
Yep.
So we had spring track practice for 2 days. And, our school sent us away for 2 weeks. And, as the captain of the ship, if you will, and I was all winter. I was ready for spring. I had to keep these kids motivated, right? So what did we do, right? We get the Google Classroom set up. We're out for 2 weeks. Guys, you got to stay training, stay focused. Don't lose any time. We'll be back in 2 weeks, right? Okay, no, guys, it's going to be 2 more weeks. All right, guys, it's going to be 2 more weeks. We got to stay training. When we come back, it's going to be this race. Don't lose focus. And what happened during that time for myself is I started getting imposter syndrome, right? I'm over here telling them they have to stay motivated. They have to do this. And I'm sitting home. We have no way to teach. I'm posting, online lessons that are just virtual. Kids have to do it by midnight. Yeah. And I'm going, what am I doing here? And that's when I started running because I started feeling like, hey, it was real cool when it was like, do as I say, not as I do. But now I have the time and I'm trying to preach to a crowd to be motivated. And I'm knowing deep down, this is over. This season is not happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I couldn't say it. Right. So I feel like some of those kids, when we were in a regular thing, it was real easy to walk out of the school, go to practice and be an athlete. But now they were forced to maybe, the noise got real quiet. They had to look at themselves and they had to assess, was this worth it? And then they never came back to it. And their mental health, because again, I'm a big fan, obviously I know Dave through athletics. I know a lot of people, a lot of my great friends were through competition, teammates. So I know the power of team. And I think kids got out of it and they never came back into it. And I feel like they lost out. And I feel that's part of why their mental health is not as strong or as consistent as it could have been because it got quiet. And now they had to hear things that maybe track was distracting them from. And for some people, it could have been the best thing that they needed because maybe they were always on the edge and they didn't know. But that's been the hardest thing. And now that we're kind of back more normal, I mean, I've had a lot of kids say, hey, I can't do this anymore. And I always say, look, I wish you the best of luck. I never press a kid to stay where they feel they can't. But I feel like if they stood, they might have found, the magic that they kind of remember that got lost. And, that's unfortunate. And, we always fight the good fight. And like I said, you want to have kids be a part of something, because when you have purpose, and I think that purpose helps you feel like you belong. And I think a lot of the mental health is kids don't know what lane they're supposed to be in, and they're having a tough time falling into a lane again.
I think that's interesting, because I guess here's the difference between an old school coach and kind of the newer generations, right? Because, you're talking about 30, 40, 50-year head coaches. And I feel like their approach to something like this wouldn't have been as nice as you were, where a kid would come and say, I can't do this. And, those coaches would have turned around and said, well, you're ruining your future. You need to stick this out. And that was something definitely that I think you guys probably were coached as, with some of your coaches a little more
Absolutely
tough as nails. It's what, you want to quit on your team? You're going to quit on your teammates? You're not
Absolutely.
only doing this, you're ruining this and that. Where, I guess that there's good and bad approaches to both. I'm not saying your approach is wrong at all, but I feel like your approach kind of is definitely molded more towards the current athlete, because I don't think the current athlete would respond well to that. I think that they would kind of shut down even more and close off any relationship with you at all possible. So I don't know. I don't envy your position right now, having to come back and deal with, a lot of these kids coming off of COVID and being stuck at home for 2 years and things like that. But I just thought it was kind of interesting to definitely juxtapose the old school mentality versus kind of more of a newer mentality in coaching.
Yeah. And listen, my tendency is at times is to be a little bit more old school and tough. But what I found, and of course, I'm sure some of these kids will be like, no way, because, I hold the standard in saying, look, we're not a club, we're a team. And that requires you to be here. It requires you to be accountable and responsible and to communicate. And, I think kids, speaking about, over-reliance on technology, I think kids have really lost the ability to communicate verbally, face-to-face. They want to send an email. They want to send an email after the fact. But what I've found, when a kid wants to quit, they've already made that decision.
Yeah.
So any convincing them, inevitably they're gonna let you down, because they're already checked out. So I don't want to say addition by subtraction, because it just sounds negative.
Yeah.
But the idea is, when they've already made that decision, it's already done. So all I tell them is, hey, look, I don't like, decisions that you just do just like this. I go, okay, this is what you're thinking. Here's where I'm at with it. If you need a break and you want to come back and think, take a couple days. No, coach, I've thought about it. Okay. We shake hands, but I will tell you what will still get under my skin is a lot of these kids will quit over email. They won't come talk to you.
Yeah, no.
They won't return the uniform. So you got to go hunt them down for it. And, everyone does what they need to do for themselves. But I do think, hey, when we've put time into each other, if you're going to break up with us, at least tell me to the face, because like I said, I'm not going to scream about it. It's just, okay. Thank you for coming to talk. I wish you the best. And, that's that. And there is some business aspect to it, because I got 100 other kids I have to worry about.
Yeah.
So, if you can't be here, I hope you find what it is that you need wherever it might be. But, now I have to pivot, and now I'm focusing on the kids that are here. So I tell my team that all the time. I can't worry about who's not here. I have to worry about who's here. I don't worry about who graduated and, wouldn't it be great if they were still here? Yeah, maybe, but
they're not.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. The reality says they're gone.
Or worry about, this kid on this other team ran this timer that Who cares?
Who cares about them? So we're at a point, we're almost at an hour now, Dave. Do you have anything else that you want to talk to? Because I know we haven't gotten to some things that we wanted to talk about. And, Coach, love to have you back on when spring is done and we can kind of put a bow on and wrap up to, how you felt about the season and anything else that's gone on throughout the season. Maybe talk about kind of the Meet of Champs changes and what you thought about them and those types of things. But I'd love to have you back on. But Dave, anything else that you have for him before we kind of close out here?
I just want to let Will know that Darren Waller has done nothing so far in this game tonight. So
Darren Waller apparently aggravated his hamstring, so that's pretty much on par with
you and I are still
process and
bottom feeders this year in our league because we don't have any quarterbacks. No. I just want to thank Will. I've been friends with him for years. I've had some struggles in my life, and he was always a person that I could call and talk to, and he never was judging me or anything, and he was always there to help give me guidance, and he's just a great friend to have, great coach, and it's just been an honor to have him on.
Oh, Davey boy, I love you, babe.
And definitely. I appreciate you coming on. It was great meeting you. Anyone that Dave gives a stamp of approval to, I kind of question at first because it's Dave, but then I got to talk to you and,
that's
and
that's a good philosophy to have.
No, but it was, it was great to have you on. I think you're a wealth of knowledge. Anyone that can last as a coach for 20 plus years in the high school level is either doing something right or has something that the administrators don't want to know about. I'm just kidding about that. But no, obviously you're doing something right there over at South Brunswick, and they have a proud program over there, a good program, and it's cool to know that you're a big part of it. And again, we'd love to have you back on. Again, for anyone that's listening, he's Wilfredo Rivera, head coach for boys and girls cross country since 2006 and head coach for boys spring track since 2005. Over at South Brunswick High School is over 2+ decades of coaching experience, and it was great to have you on. I really appreciate it.
Alex, thank you. Dave, thank you. It was great being here, and I always love talking track, so I appreciate you guys for having me on.
100%. So anyone like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread the show word of mouth. Find us on the socials at Talking Nobles. And Coach, you can help us out with this. We haven't talked about this the last few weeks, but I'm bringing it back, Hyatt. Yes. Send us your PR. Get your athletes, if they have a PR, or anyone that they know, again, they're friends with everyone in the area. Tell them that there's this track show that wants to give them a shout out that can potentially reach millions of listeners because we're everywhere you can find a podcast. Tell them there's a cool podcast. The athletes are welcome to come on with parental permission. We'd love to have them on. And, send us the PR. We'll give them a shout out. We'll say what race they are in. We'll let the world know about what their work is, or even if it's a freaking great race and they feel really great about it. Doesn't have to be a PR necessarily, but this goes to your throwers, jumpers, anyone. They have a PR. Send it our way. Tell them to spread the word of mouth to anyone else that there's a show that's willing to shout their PRs out and really get them out there and let it be known, because track is a grueling sport and we all feel the same pain in the end if we're given 100%. So everyone deserves that recognition.
Excellent. Will do. Definitely. I'll let my guys and girls know. Sure, they'll love it.
Cool. All right. So thank you everyone for listening to Talking to Nobles. We will be back next week as always, and we'll have a good time. We'll talk some more track. So again, everybody, thank you so much. So long, y'all.